fantasizing over a future shared with the man. She hardly cared if marriage to Ames would lower her alleged station in life, for she had lived like a servant for half of it anyway. At least, she had done so after her mother left. Giulia pushed thoughts of Ames from her mind. Dwelling on the man would do her no good at present. He was in London starting his business, and she would make do with clandestine letters until they could be reunited again. She had devised a plan. Ames would address his letters to her father, which would naturally be passed on to her. It was foolproof. No one need know she was corresponding with a man whom she was not yet engaged to, and Ames's notes would fall in with the rest of them easily enough. Letters addressed to her father were bound to pour into Halstead Manor since she had given her new direction to her father's publisher. Adventurers of the world seemed unlikely to give up on Patrick Pepper and his assistant Jules any time soon. Giulia's foot collided with an object, and she pitched forward, sprawling on the rough dirt road. Pushing up onto her knees, she looked behind her to find a heap lying prostrate in the lane. Shadows fell behind the dark figure, blending it into the road. The heap shifted slightly, and a low groan emanated from one end, the end which had snagged her foot. It was a person. No, it was a man. Giulia quietly got to her feet and rounded the edge of the crumpled form toward her discarded luggage. He groaned once more, causing her to jump. Shaking herself, Giulia focused. Father had taught her to be cautious, but he had also taught her to be kind. And this man was clearly hurt. Squaring her shoulders, Giulia straightened her spine and looked in unabashed courage toward the fallen man. "Sir?" "Nothing." She stepped closer and bent slightly, hoping to ascertain the man's status from his clothing. The near darkness made that an impossible feat. But what sort of man would find himself in this position? Could he be a ruffian, or perhaps a drunken workman fallen on his way home from the pub? Giulia glanced around her again. Unlikely. There was no building in sight, let alone a pub. And according to the stage driver, this lane led to one place and one place only: Halstead Manor. Giulia bent lower and raised her voice slightly. "Sir? Are you alert?" A mumble came from the man. It was as easy to discern as his clothing in the fading light. So, not at all. She stood, hesitating. It was growing far too dark to see what she was dealing with. A hand shot out and grabbed her ankle before she could move away. A heart-wrenching cry escaped the man, and his grip immediately slackened. Worry moved into Giulia's gut and churned. The sudden and inappropriate feeling of the man's hand on her ankle was instantly overshadowed by the pain in his voice. This was no drunken farmer. He was hurt. Giulia dropped to her knees and did not hesitate as her nursing instincts kicked in. She felt up and down each arm before moving to his neck. He lay face down, his head bent away from her. Her eyes were adjusted to the dim lighting, and she took notice of his clothing. Even if the dark made it utterly impossible to see, she would have known who he was by the feel of the fine wool that made his coat, the high-quality neckcloth circling his throat, the polished shine of his hessians caught out of the corner of her eye. This man was a gentleman. His neck and head fully examined, Giulia moved lower, feeling along his broad shoulders. Part of her hoped not to find injury, but she knew it was a fruitless wish, and waited in anticipation for the recoil that would show her exactly where he hurt. Hopefully, before she had to move much lower. Her fingers kneaded the muscle of his far shoulder and worked their way inward. She reached the shoulder blade closest to herself, and he cried out again, a split second before her fingertips landed in something wet. Wet, warm, and gooey. Blood. Oh, heavens! It was a blessed thing she wasn't the fainting type. After feeling a little further, she dug her hand under the man's body and felt the underside of the wound. Well, that was a relief. It had to be a bullet, and it must have gone clean through. Shifting to access the bottom of her petticoats, Giulia ripped off a length of fabric and